Canada's First Ministers gathered in Ottawa today to talk about the trade relationship with the U.S. and upcoming CUSMA negotiations. But they also ended up talking about threats to Canada's sovereignty.
We need to express that we will fight for this country, that we'll stand up for it, and that those who don't wish to, those who would solicit a foreign government to try to come in and take over our country or break it up, in my opinion, that is treasonous activity, and it needs to be called out. It needs to be stopped.
I've always been clear that me and our United Conservative Caucus are supportive of a strong and sovereign Alberta within a united Canada. I'm not going to demonize or marginalize a million of my fellow citizens when they've got legitimate grievances. What we need to do is we need to give Albertans hope.
The governments that are going to make a difference to Canada, to Alberta, to Canada, are at this table. We expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect, and then move on to what we can do together.
Okay, what they're all talking about there comes in the wake of revelations in the Financial Times that the leaders of separatist group Alberta Prosperity Project have met with U.S. State Department officials 3 times since last April. White House officials say the administration meets with, quote, civil society groups, but that no support or commitments were conveyed. We're going to start there with our reporter roundtable. We're here to talk about all of this. Robert Fife is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for the Globe and Mail. Mia Rabson is the Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press. And Joël Denis-Bellevance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse, who is in Calgary. And I'll be joining him there tomorrow for the Conservative Party convention. Okay, terrorist trades and treason. Bob, what did you make of the way the First Ministers all responded to these meetings between the State Department and the Alberta Prosperity Group?
Well, I think the Premier of Alberta could have been much stronger in standing up for an independent Canada and to speak out more strongly against the people who are trying to break up the province of Alberta and have it join the United States. I understand why. A big chunk of those people are presumably supporters of her, and she's actually fed into this herself. She's the one who lit the fire, and now it could be getting out of control. One would have thought that she would be trying to rein this in, particularly because she wants to increase foreign investment in the oil and gas industry. And one thing that the oil and gas people who invest do not want to put money into any country or any province where there's a risk of separation and instability.
Yeah, borders on 4 sides would not necessarily help Alberta get its exports to market. That noise you all heard, by the way, is a sound check going on behind JD. He has a band traveling with him. We'll come to him in just a second. Mia, what were your thoughts on this, though? David Eby called it treason. I mean, the fact that the State Department is meeting with them, maybe they do meet with civil society groups, as they say, but with Scott Bessent and Donald Trump, and now this,
I mean, I think I find it hard to believe that the State Department wasn't very aware of what they were doing or who they were meeting with and the impact that it could possibly have. I was kind of interested today that, as much as Danielle Smith didn't quite beat back what was going on very strongly, she was still stronger about it than the Prime Minister was. In fact, he didn't really say anything about sovereignty until she did, and then he was like, oh yeah, I agree with her. We must protect our sovereignty. She's the one who said she would raise it with her delegate in Washington and with the U.S. ambassador. He never said any of that, and he was quite muted, I felt, on this today, which is an interest. I mean, I know sort of what he's trying to do with the United States. He's also trying sometimes not to poke the bear, but he kind of also poked the bear in a big way earlier this year. So the fact that he was kind of just understated on it was very interesting to me today. It was like he didn't know what to do with this. Yeah,
JD, I know you're busy out there in Calgary, but I'm wondering what your thoughts were as the band plays on behind you. What were your thoughts on what the Prime Minister said today?
Well, I'm very much interested in seeing, in commenting in David Eby's comments. I didn't know that Mr. Eby could be passionate and had some charisma, and that he had emotions. And those words that he used were very powerful in my sense. The most powerful words that I've seen from a Premier about the possibility of Alberta going its own way. But that means that Mr. Eby now, from now on, has an obligation of results. If he wants to help fight separatism in Alberta, he'll have to compromise and make compromise on building possibly a pipeline, give results to Albertans. who have real grievances. Now, I'll throw this to you, and I think you probably will want to comment it, but I think this is the beginning of foreign interference by the United States in Alberta's politics and Canadian politics. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is a referendum campaign in Alberta. Eventually, we see Donald Trump promising to build Keystone XL to seduce Albertans to vote yes to separation and eventually absorb Alberta as the 51st state. So this is something to watch. It's very serious, and I've said this in the past on your show. I'm more worried about the referendum issue in Alberta than I am about the referendum issue in Quebec for the following reason, because you could see foreign interference grow exponentially because the United States is very much in a state of mind of trying to get more territory.
Yeah, all right. Bob, well, we're going to navigate this, folks. This is going to be a little bit of fun because they're going up and down there. I wonder about this, right? Because what Scott Besson said, they have a lot of resources. They're looking for a way out. They can be, maybe they'll be happy with us this meeting. And if you do get to a referendum, the ability to manipulate things with social media, technology, and artificial intelligence, where the Americans and to some degree the Chinese, they're the dominant players. And disrupting a country, I mean, it was preposterous to think of, but it's in their interest.
Well, first of all, we shouldn't be surprised about this. Early last year, J.D. Vance went to Europe, and he offered support for the far-right European parties.
At the Munich Security Conference.
Right. He met with the ADF leader in Germany. He was very laudatory towards Marine Le Pen, who was being barred from running in French election campaign, and said they should allow her to do so. So, this is very typical out of the playbook of the Trump administration, who feel it's mind-boggling, but they go after their allies and try to disrupt these democracies and seem to turn a blind eye to what's going on in Russia or in Hungary, which is led by a far-right leader.
But Orban is one of their club.
Right, he's part of the club. And, so it shouldn't surprise us that they are going to try to cause trouble in Canada. I don't think this is related to the Davos speech. This is something that they've been doing for some period of time. To cause internal turmoil or in Canada and allies of the used to be allies of the United States, but to your point, they do seem to be looking at the rich resources that Alberta has and thinking, oh, this is another way to be able to pull Alberta into the U.S. economy. Mind you, you also have American states like Maine and Minnesota saying, hey, we'd rather join Canada.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, we get an NFL team. But, Mia, you look at it and the way, to go back to the J.D. Vance trip to Munich, because the Munich Security Conference this year is coming up soon. Viktor Orban and Hungary very much in the club of sort of the right-wing party. Macron leads France, which is obviously an ally, but they court Le Pen and the National Rally Party. Chancellor Merz leads Germany. They offer support for the AfD. You've got Keir Starmer in Nigel Farage is their guy, right? And so you can very easily see efforts being made through the social media disruption channels, because they are a content machine, the Trump administration, pouring influence into Alberta should it come to a referendum.
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we've seen now with the government being very overt and the Trump administration being quite overt in some of these efforts is new. But I mean, I take you back a few years when the Freedom Convoy was in Ottawa, and that was also, there was a lot of instigating and funneling of funds and funneling of support coming out of the right-wing movement in the United States as well. And people raised that as an issue. If American financing is behind some of this. I do think having the government and the Trump administration's own secretaries being behind some of this and being kind of overt about it, it probably requires a stronger response than, well, they have to respect our sovereignty. I mean, that's what they've been saying for a year. They clearly don't. So the muted response that we saw from everybody today, except for the Premier of British Columbia, I think Canadians are going to expect a lot more from the government to push back quickly and loudly on any of this.
All right, JD, I'm going to try to bring you in here, but I think I see a violin or a fiddle being played on the stage behind you. I mean, what are your particular thoughts on that? Because, you know, Mia does rightly point to the financial support that came in for the convoy to protest government overreach, though they seem less concerned about what's happened in Minnesota than what happened in Ottawa. How do you deal with this if you're the federal government and the U.S. is getting into the middle of this one way or another?
Yeah, I think I didn't get all your questions, but clearly there will be foreign interference in some way, whether through social media, whether by meetings that they're having, or whether by funding. And that, you know, we've seen it in the convoy that was paralyzing Ottawa downtown during the COVID. And I think that this is a serious issue. And we've asked in the past, you know, security officials in Ottawa whether they had seen anything of kind of foreign interference from the United States. They said no. But I think they're going to start watching more, following the revelations that we've heard today and we saw in the Financial Times.
You know, David, I think I see Jenny Byrne there telling him, okay, Cochrane's on.
No, it's
Put the music going.
It is Brett Kissel doing his sound check because he's the opening entertainment there tonight, and a big fan of J.D. Bellavance' commentary. That's all we can tell here. But, you know, we may not be able to hear everything J.D. is saying, Bob, but we all heard what Scott Besson said, you know, in his response to the Davos speech, virtue signaling, don't pick a fight going into USMCA. Our economy is so much bigger than yours. Sort of, I don't know, reacting to the Davos speech and proving the point of the Davos speech all at the same time.
Well, you know, it's kind of unusual to see. Usually the Treasury Secretary is the calm, wise voice of any administration because they're responsible for the U.S. economy. In this particular instance, we have a Treasury Board Secretary who seems to have been weaponized by Donald Trump to go out and go after Prime Minister Carney. Ever since the Davos speech, he's been out on U.S. television and hammering away at Carney. And this is quite unusual. But, you know, this is what the president has probably asked him to do so, and he's out there willingly going after Carney, who he calls a technocrat.
Do you think it was the content of the speech, Bob, that caused this, or the reception?
It was the fact that he upstaged Donald Trump. Everything has to be about Donald Trump, as you know. If he's not the center of attention, he pulls a tantrum. And he's still out there tweeting last night against Mark Carney. He's really sore about what happened, that everybody in the United States, particularly, but other world leaders, were so laudatory to Prime Minister Carney in that speech, and so it takes him a long time to get over that, and he may not. But at the same time, we do have to be careful because you don't want to keep poking this guy because he does have a lot of power and he can cause a lot of damage. Yeah, and look, as we're talking about the threats to Canada, he's just posted again on Truth Social, upset with Canada's certification process around Gulfstream jets, saying if Canada doesn't certify those planes, he will decertify some Bombardier jets, and threatening 50% tariffs on any Canadian aircraft going into the United States. So there you are, right? It never ends. But what's interesting, Mia, is as we are, almost a week, more than a week from the Davos speech now, you do see a lot of criticism, mostly from conservatives and conservative and business-leaning people of the Prime Minister's speech. The premiers, though, pretty lined up behind Mark Carney on this. I mean, what do you make of the political reaction we're seeing on this?
It was interesting that the initial response from Donald Trump, I mean, he was clearly upset because he was upstaged. He was clearly upset because he seemed to have an ally in Mark Carney for the first year. Mark Carney, there was some criticism of Mark Carney for how he had handled the president in Canada up until that point, that he was a little bit too conciliatory. And I think what was happening and what you're seeing from the reaction from some of the premiers, et cetera, is they've been waiting for this kind of reaction. They've been waiting for Mark Carney to put his actual elbows up, which, you know, has since the election hasn't really happened that strongly. So I think you're seeing some people responding to it in Canada because they're kind of happy to say, look, we're finally pushing back. Enough is enough. You also saw, I think, the president spiraling a little bit in the last couple of weeks with, 200% tariffs here. Europe is pushing back. He's realizing doesn't necessarily have the push and the power, and he's not getting his way the way he thought he would. And now he's sent out his team is out there trying to convince Canada, you actually do need us. You can't just dismiss us, because they also, it's to their benefit that we don't just walk away. Canada's threat or ability to just walk away from the United States and find new partners is the worst thing that the United States could see happen.
Okay, I want to switch to Calgary, where JD is and where we're going to be tomorrow, because we're going there, we're up early, to cover the Conservative Convention and the vote on Pierre Poilievre's leadership, an important vote to see whether Poilievre can stay on as party leader. And here's a reminder of how we got to this point.
We have a new leader, Pierre Poilievre and Anna Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre ran for the Conservative leadership in 2022, winning by a landslide on the first ballot. The Conservatives saw a surge in support with Poilievre at the helm. Less than a year after he became leader, Poilievre had climbed to a 10-point lead over Justin Trudeau in the polls.
Who's ready to axe the carbon tax?
The party also saw by-election wins, including flipping 2 Liberal seats.
We're going to bring it home.
By all accounts, the Conservatives were riding high, now up 20 points over the Liberals. Poilievre was on course to win the next election and become Prime Minister.
I intend to resign.
But that all changed when Justin Trudeau stepped down and Mark Carney stepped in.
Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
The Conservatives lost their commanding lead in the polls and headed into the federal election neck and neck with the Liberals. The results of that election were disappointing for Poilievre. The Conservatives did not form government, and Poilievre lost his long-time Ottawa area seat.
If you told me that we would get 41% of the vote and still not win, I would have said, you're crazy.
Forcing him to run in a summer by-election in Alberta to get back to the House of Commons.
Please forgive me for my late arrival.
Things haven't necessarily gotten much easier for the Conservative leader. In the fall sitting, 2 Conservative MPs crossed the floor to the Liberals and one quit politics altogether, which has spurred questions about whether Poilievre is still the best person to lead the party. Okay, we're going to check in with JD and the Sunshine Band. JD, what are you hearing from Conservatives out there, other than the music, about the vote tomorrow and what they expect he'll get and what they think Poilievre needs to get?
I can't hear you, David. I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. All right. We'll start here. I'll get someone to get the question to you if I can. I'm sure there's someone there. Mia, let's start with you. I mean, what's your sense of what Pierre Poilievre needs to get? The number I look at, Stephen Harper, 84% in 2005, after he lost the election to Paul Martin, but then later won the next election. Where do you think Pierre Poilievre needs to get tomorrow?
I mean, I think anything less than 80% would not be a good outcome for him. I mean, that was kind of the marker for him even in the by-election that he won. That if he didn't get that 80% of that popular vote, that it wouldn't look good on him. Whether or not he thinks he needs to get 80%, and what he will do if he gets less than that. But I'm not hearing any suggestions. People think he might get less than that.
He wants it to start with a 9, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, I think he wants a higher number. But if for some reason it came in lower, what number he would actually think is too low is probably the question I'm not able to answer. Right. The higher the better for him. He wants to come back to the House of Commons, saying that he has an absolute strong mandate from his party to stay on as leader, to quash down any potential pushback from within the caucus, which is there's not a ton of happiness in that caucus right now about where things stand, and he could face a bigger challenge from there if he doesn't get a big enough number in Calgary this weekend.
Yeah, Bob Paul Wells was on the show last night, and he said Friday isn't the end of it, Saturday is the start of it. How do you view what Mr. Poilievre faces Friday night?
Well, look, I think I agree with Mia that anything below 80%, he'd be toast.
Yeah.
But people I've talked to say they've worked very hard. The fix is in. It's going to get Mao-like numbers, so anywhere between 85 or 90, maybe a little bit more. But that's not going to be the end of it, regardless if he comes out of that convention with a high number, because we're all going to be watching on Sunday and Monday of whether the Liberals are able to successfully get any Conservative MPs to cross the floor. And if so, the bleeding begins.
Yeah, okay, we have texted the questions to JD. JD, I hope you were able to get the question. What does Pierre need to get? What does he expect to get? What are your thoughts there in Calgary?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, my sense is that Mr. Poilievre will get a good number. I think everybody expects him to get at least 80% upwards. So that's the magic number. If he gets 80, I think he's safe. But he will have to quickly pivot after that one. He will be pleading in his speech tomorrow to get a second chance, but he will have to pivot quickly to try and ask for a second chance with the electorate, and that's going to be a more difficult task than the one he will be facing this weekend with his parties. And also, next week, there is a big meeting of Conservatives to mark the 20th anniversary of the election of Stephen Harper. It's a big gala happening Wednesday night in Ottawa, and it will be inevitable that people will make comparison between Stephen Harper and Pierre Poilievre, and that's going to be a tough week again for Mr. Poilievre on that sense. And I had a chat with Quebec lieutenant who served under Stephen Harper. Lawrence Cannon, for example, Denis Lebel and Christian Paradis, they were all praising Stephen Harper, but none of them will be here this weekend at this convention. Right. That's very telling to me.
Okay, JD, is there a number that's too high for like moderate conservatives? Like if he gets 95, 98, do the people who want change get spooked? What do you think? Okay. I'll text you. He's a print reporter living a broadcaster's nightmare, and we did not expect this. I'm so sorry. Mia, your thoughts on that? Like, there's you know, there is a jitteriness, like people hoping for pivots and change that never seem to come. You know, if it is a rock solid endorsement, does that become a thing where maybe some of the people in the caucus go, maybe I'm not going to get the party I want? I don't know.
I do think there's somewhat of a disconnect as well between the people that are going to be at this convention voting for their lead, whether or not they support him as the leader, and the people they need to vote to get them over that hump in the next election. Mm-hmm. And those are the people I think some of those jittery caucus members are concerned about. Those are the people he needs to pivot around, and it's a tough balance that we always talk about, that a conservative leader or any leader really has to mark between sort of the tried and true faithful who want one type of party and the sort of more balanced, more moderate version that might attract more people to vote for you and actually put you into government. So just remember, the people who are voting at this convention, these are sort of the tried and true blue conservatives. Exactly. They're and a very heavily Western conservative, which is where Mr. Poilievre gets a significant source of his support. So maybe not a lot from Quebec, not a lot from Ontario, not a lot necessarily even from Atlantic Canada. Those are where the votes are, those are where the seats are that this party needs to win. So whatever the number is, no matter how high it is, it doesn't necessarily tell the story for the caucus and the MPs about where this party is actually going to be able to go.
Right, and I was on my phone while Mia was talking, not because I was ignoring her, because I'm trying to text a question to JD Bellevance. So look, he's reading it there now. So Bob, your thoughts on that one, and just see what.
Well, okay, so if he gets, say, in the 90s, I make the point is that the fix is in. I mean, they have been working to get the people that will vote for him to come.
And the Ontario PCs.
And Ontarians are having their own convention. They're not going to show up. And as JD said to me earlier this week, that only 100 people from Quebec are showing up. Mm. So
of the 2,500 we're told.
Right. So when you think about it, this is doesn't really. I don't think it really matters. What really matters is whether he can hold his caucus together, can stop the Liberals from. The progressive conservative liberal prime minister from pulling some of these red Tories into his government, and more importantly, Mr. Carney is leading by huge numbers over Mr. Poilievre, and you know, if he can't change that, he's toast regardless. Right. I mean, maybe he can survive, but the next election campaign. If Liberals form a majority as a result of Mr. Carney's leadership, you know, I don't think he can last beyond. I mean, he gets one more chance.
Right. Okay, JD, 30, 40 seconds, whatever you want to say, buddy. Whatever you want to say, JD, we got about 30, 40 seconds. Go ahead. Bring it home.
All right. What were you saying, David? Sorry about that.
Just anything you wanted to say. Just we got 30 seconds. Just wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Poilievre wants a big result, like over 85% if he can, to beat the Harper's score in 2006, I think. And so this is going to be a big test, but the big test will come afterwards. If you lose more MPs, if you can't rise in the polls, if the gap between him and Mr. Carney, Canadians' preferred Prime Minister's perception does not improve, it's going to be more difficult for Mr. Poilievre.